Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the push press versus the strict overhead press. Let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skill on my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And it is a good topic because when I was doing my push presses in my video earlier today, I called them overhead presses, and while technically the push press is a variation of the overhead press, not quite the same exercise, and they do have slightly different goals. Now a lot of people say which one is better. Well, it really depends. That's kind of like asking what's better, a hammer or a screwdriver. Well, it totally depends on what you're trying to do, doesn't it? Yeah? Totally different tools. They're both great. They're both fantastic. The strict overhead press and the push press are both fantastic exercises for both upper body strength, for shoulder development, for tricep development, all of those things. Now, the difference is that the strict press, you bring a barbell down to your chest, you touch your chest, and you press it overhead. Right, you use no leg drive. There's no leg drive at all. There's no momentum involved. Whereas in the push press, you use a little bit of leg drive to get it started. Now, some people will say, isn't that kind of like cheating? Well, yeah, in a way, other than the difference is that when you do a push press, and yes, I'm aware there are different variations of the push press, I do the one personally that has only a little bit of leg drive. I do that because I'm not trying to push an enormously higher weight than I would be able to do on a strict press. I'm just trying to get just a little bit of extra behind it. Now, some people would say, well, what's the point of that? You're taking some of the tension off of your shoulders, everything else. Yeah, you are taking a little bit of the tension off the shoulders if you were to use the same weight. But if you were to add 5 or 10 pounds onto there, more than you might do strict, you're not on the concentric side. You might be deloading the concentric side just slightly, but probably not a noticeable amount in terms of muscle fiber recruitment. But it trains you to be more explosive. In other words, it's a more explosive exercise. And if you're trying to have it carry over to other movements, such as sport-specific movements, such as punching someone, pushing someone on a playing field, when you push or hit someone like that, are you using just your chest, shoulders, triceps? Of course not. You are using your legs, your hips, your glutes, everything. In fact, most people will tell you pushing someone on a football field is very obviously a full body movement. A lot of boxers will tell you when you really punch someone as hard as you can, even in boxing or martial arts, it is in a way a full body movement. There is hip involvement, there's core involvement. By using a little bit of push press, you're training your body to use leg drive when you push. That will apply to those other endeavors. It also turns it into more of a full body exercise. We'll get to that in a second of why that matters. But in terms of actual muscular development, what people need to remember, there's 2 different ends to every rep. There's the concentric, which is the lifting the weight against the gravity, and then there's the lowering the weight. Well, when you're doing something like a push press like that, and let's say you do use a concentric lift to have to allow you to lift just a little more weight because you're using a little bit of leg drive, what happens on the eccentric side? A lot of exercises you can drop the weight without really putting tension on the muscles, right? Like a barbell row, if you cheat on a barbell row and just kind of let it go and catch it at the bottom, you don't really have to slow the weight quite as much with your lats, with your biceps, things like that. On a push press, because of the nature of it, your deltoids and particularly your triceps have to take the brunt of the load on the way down. So in other words, if normally you could only strict press 100 pounds 5 times, but you're able to push press 105 or 110 5 times, what happens on the eccentric end? Using a little heavier weight on the eccentric end. I'm not saying eccentric reps or negative reps are the be-all, end-all of hypertrophy, because they aren't. In fact, they're oftentimes overrated for it, but they are a valuable hypertrophy tool. And we need to think of it in those terms. It's another tool in the toolbox, right? It has its use. Relatively heavy eccentric reps or negative reps have their place in hypertrophy training. So any potential loss that you're losing on the lifting end of it by doing it more explosive that way, as far as development goes, you're regaining it on the eccentric side because those muscles are having to take that heavier weight to slow it down. But when you have to slow down a relatively heavy weight with a muscle, and you do it repeatedly for rep after rep after rep, the case of like what I did today, 5 sets of 5, had to do it 25 times, that stimulates muscle growth, does it not? Again, there have been studies on eccentric-only training showing that actually decent muscle growth can be obtained just by lowering a heavy weight. That's been shown in quite a few studies over the years. It isn't as good as doing both reps, but it actually produces pretty reasonable muscle growth. So what you're getting on that end is a lot of good eccentric training. Now on the other end, because you're making it a full body exercise, you are training yourself to be more explosive. You're training yourself to accelerate a weight. Strength and conditioning coaches have looked at different studies, and what they found is that certain types of push presses actually turn out to be one of the most valuable exercises for force development in the thighs. In fact, the push press actually seems to, in certain studies, be a better exercise for force development in your thighs than even squats are. And squats are decently good at it. Now, they're not going to add the total amount of size and strength to your thighs that a barbell squat is, but if you're training just for explosiveness, and people say, well, what do you mean? How would that come in handy? How about your vertical leap? That's an example of where you might need force development in your thighs. And on a vertical leap, you're not squatting all the way down and jumping up, you're just doing the top. Well, you're training yourself to take a weight that's not particularly heavy, which is okay for speed work and force development work, lighter weights. And you're trying to accelerate it very quickly in a very short range of motion, because on a push press there's just a little dip and you're trying to maximize acceleration. It actually turns out to be a fantastic stimulator of that. That carries over into a lot of activities. How about sprinting? When you start into a sprint, that force development of the thighs from the push press carries over to it. When you begin your vertical leap for different sports, it's a valuable sports training exercise, and that's one of the things that we need to look at, the difference here for people who are training to be more athletic. And what I talk a lot about on this channel is training for athleticism. Maybe not because you want to be a specific athlete, but maybe because you just want to be more athletic. You want to have the ability to perform better if you do pick up a different endeavor. Let's say you decide one day you want to go become a tennis player, or play a bunch of basketball later, pick up games of basketball. Training in the gym in a way that makes you more athletic is going to give you more carryover to that. It's going to give you better overall fitness. And that's something I'm trying to promote a lot more of these days. I'm also training myself in that way. I'm 40 years old. So I think about this stuff a lot in terms of overall fitness, overall athleticism, things like that. So the push press, because of the nature of the exercise, turns your shoulder presses into a full body exercise that helps you with force development in your legs, helps you become more explosive, and at the same time still helping build your upper chest, your entire shoulder girdle, your triceps, things like that. It's multifaceted in nature. Now, I'm not saying strict presses are bad or you can't do strict presses for a lot of the same reasons, because you can. Strict presses are great. And there might be reasons why you might want to do a strict press. Maybe because you're dealing with overall recovery issues. Maybe you're doing a lot of squatting volume, and the extra push presses instead of a strict press gives you more axial loading, more fatigue in your hips, more fatigue in certain muscles. It could become a potential overtraining issue. So for some people in that case, even though they might even want that extra athleticism, they have to reel it in and do a strict press for those reasons. So it's not necessarily right for every person at every point in their training program, but if you have the extra recovery, you want the extra athleticism, you want those benefits from the exercise, it's a good exercise to work into your training program. And you know what, when you reach a point in your training to where maybe your recovery or your volumes and things might require you to go back to a strict press, and go back to a strict press. It really comes down to what you are specifically trying to do with your training and how everything that you're doing in the gym fits into your overall training pattern, your overall recovery, your overall goals. And so when I say, you know, the strict press has its uses for people and the push press has its uses for people, they could both have uses for the exact same person in different points in their training. And that's what we need to keep in mind when we look at these different tools. So a lot of times when people say things like, hey, which of these tools is better? The answer is, well, it depends on what you are trying to do, what you're trying to get out of it right now at this specific moment in time. Because the one that's best for you today might not be the one that's best for you next week. It's all about just evaluating these things and figuring out what's best for your overall goals and working with it. But they're both great exercises. They both have their uses. Just for a lot of people, and like me particularly, the push press is more valuable to my overall goals at the moment. And for a lot of you, it might be too, depending on what you're trying to do. And if it's not, then don't use it. Do a strict press instead. They're both fantastic exercises. And both of them, and one of them should be in every person's routine. I don't care what your lifting goals are, you should probably be doing one of these two exercises, either the standing press strictly or the standing press as a push press. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.